Hi everyone, I'm Chad Shoup, and welcome to another edition of Bank It or Tank It. Today, we're going to be breaking down a stock that was one of the first to be recommended on one of my recent videos, and that's from Cat's Depot. They told me to take a look at Peloton. This is the exercise equipment maker that's really took the world by storm with a cycle machine, an exercise bike that you sit on and pedal, because they had a software as a subscription basically where you can use the bike, but you had to subscribe to their live stream for their classes to get their full experience where you can sit, and as you cycle, it's like you're cycling in a group of people without having to go to a class. Now this bike, the sales for this and for their equipment had already started to take off before the coronavirus pandemic shut down gyms, but then that led to a massive boom. And today we're going to break down how that's looked on their key stats, how that's taken the shape of their fundamentals, some of the quick comps in sentiment, but then ultimately we're going to get to the price chart. And today we have a classic price pattern that's developed for this price chart that I'm excited to get into, and it's going to tell us exactly what we can expect, at least exactly what to watch here over the coming weeks and few months for the stock. So before I get into all that though, I just want to make sure that you have a chance to scroll below, click subscribe so that we don't miss out on any of my upcoming Bank It or Tank It videos or my quick takes videos. And you can continue to leave me comments below. I take a look at all these comments that come in on my videos, and I add all the stocks to my watch list for Bank It or Tank It stocks, and I'm going to continue to feature them in my quick takes and in upcoming Bank It or Tank It videos that are in the weeks and months ahead. So continue to leave me comments, and if you enjoy the content, just hit the like button to let me know. Now before we break down Peloton and we run through our Bank It or Tank It analysis, which is the fundamentals, the sentiment, and the technicals that we're going to break down on the chart to figure out whether or not this is a stock that we want to bank on going higher or it's set to tank and head lower, I just want to give you a fair warning to give me a break on my voice a little bit today if you're standing out, because I took my son earlier this week to the Florida Panthers playoff hockey game, and we were screaming and shouting. It was a great game, but I think I lost my voice there, at least my hearing, so nothing quite sounds the same today. But I just wanted to give you that warning before we dive into our video for Peloton. So let's break Peloton down, and we're going to start with the net income and total revenues. This is a very simple chart that I like to use because it shows us the trends that we're looking at. In the blue bars, the key for that's on the right hand side, and that's the total revenues, and then the line on the graph, the key for that's on the left hand side, and that's the net income. So you can see that they're operating at a loss because the zero on the left hand side means that net income was operating at a loss until the last 12 months that ended March 31st, 2021. So that's basically covering the pandemic period, and we can see the surge in revenues there. We see a nice jump in revenues and a nice jump in net income. So the profits were the biggest news for investors. They love seeing that, and you can see that on the last two bars as we get out to 2022, 2023. They expect some of that momentum to continue, especially for revenues. Those are still some solid jumps. And when you step back and think about what Peloton does, I mean, they sell exercise equipment for homes. So this is a big industry that's been booming here because of the pandemic, and we're stuck at home. Couldn't even go to the gyms. So they saw a large amount of sales, and it's interesting to see that investors, for the most part, at least analysts covering the stock, still expect that sales trend to continue to grow, even though they just went through pretty much a massive boom for the industry, that you would expect to see some of that taper off a little bit. So this is interesting to see how the analysts are still viewing the stock. Now let's take a look at some quick comps, because I want to see how they compare against competitors in their industry. That this is just selected from the S&P Capital IQ list of quick comps, and you can see that they're pretty much consumer industries here. We don't really have a list of just companies that are focused on workout materials. You have Uber Technologies on the list, which is the carpool app, and you have Mattel, which is toys, and we have golf companies, we have other outdoor companies. So this is a pretty broad range of consumer stocks, but we can still get an idea of where Peloton sits. So it's got a 30 billion market cap. Off of this list, it's a pretty large company. Only Uber is the one that's the only one bigger in market cap than total revenues, total income. We just saw that Peloton is turning higher than negative net income, so that doesn't show up on the compound average annual growth rate for the last 3 years. But they should have had something here for revenues, because we just saw the charts. Revenues were growing off the charts, actually. When you looked at where they started from, there's basically nothing here just in 2017 in terms of sales. And they've continued to ramp that up, and they essentially doubled from 2020 to 2021. So it's a massive move in terms of revenues. They're going to be crushing these other companies that are at an average of 4.6%. So Peloton's definitely growing revenues at a very rapid pace. The question is it going to keep up as the economy goes back to normal? So now we can take a look at the sentiment for Peloton, and the price to earnings ratio is extreme, 156 times earnings. The average for the rest of these companies is just 25. So that's definitely more along the lines of the broader market. 156 means that investors are still paying for a lot of growth, or at least paying for a lot of earnings growth. And the question is, are they going to deliver? Are they going to be able to turn this around and show that what they've been doing here during the pandemic and boosting sales with their treadmills and with their bikes, even though their treadmills, and I caution you not to watch any of the videos, but they've had to recall treadmills because of kids getting injured on them. So that's going to take a hit for their sales, at least as they try to expand past the bike and past the software service that they have on their biking subscriptions. But from everything we've seen so far, investors are still not concerned. They're not concerned about the issues. They're not concerned about Peloton really being focused on just selling one type of exercise equipment, and that's the bike, and selling subscriptions for that, which is really where they make their money, adding subscriptions on so that way you can join a class. But at 156 times earnings here, investors are not worried about it. Short interest, just 6.7%. Nothing crazy. The average is 4.6%. So as long as you're bouncing around the single digits, it's nothing that investors are really getting too alarmed about yet. And then the average broker recommendation, a 1 is a strong buy, a 5 is a strong sell. They're at 1.79. So it's an outperform rating for the stock, and that means that analysts have the stock rated as a buy. They expect the shares to continue to go higher. They don't care about the price to earnings ratio. They're not worried about revenues falling off the cliff. The analysts right now on Wall Street have this stock as a buy. So let's pull up the price chart and let's see how investors and traders are actually trading the stock, and if they're as worried as it comes out on the fundamentals and the sentiment that we just looked at. So I told you I had a classic price pattern that we could take a look at, and here it is. Classic head and shoulders formation. And what you have with the head and shoulders, you can see that we have the left shoulder on one side of the chart where we get the ramp higher, then it pulls back, then it continues higher to even higher highs, forms what is we're going to end up calling it the head before we get a pullback to this key support line. And this is really what makes the head and shoulders pattern work, is that we have a neckline. So then the right shoulder, not as strong. We can see that it was weaker. It didn't go up quite as high as the left shoulder. But this is a right shoulder because we had this consolidation period. And then it started to roll over. And then it broke below the neckline. Now that is a worrisome sign from this classic technical pattern. That's really what you want to look at. Does the neckline hold or does it break? And in this case, it broke. So that tells us that we're going to put Peloton on our tank it list for now, because even though the fundamentals and the sentiment and some of these other things looks pretty good for the stock, we can see that investors are really, really concerned. I mean, maybe it just got ahead of itself, but now that they've been pulling back here in 2021, investors are concerned. And this neckline that was support, so I'm keeping it in green now just to highlight that. But once what was previous support, a neckline like this, becomes resistance. So we can see that Peloton at this moment is flirting with this neckline, and it's either going to break back above it to where it can hold as support again, or it's going to plunge lower from here. So until it is firmly above this neckline, so we're talking probably up to about $105 a share, because if it's just teetering around it, that's not enough to really give us a clear signal. So $105 a share or below, this stock is staying on our tank it list. And as far as a price target, now look, this stock, we can just see even on this chart that I have the time frames here back to 2020. So this is after the pandemic. I can zoom out, but we can see that that brings you down to just under the $50. Now this goes back to the IPO of 2019, and we can see that it's just in the $20, $30 range. Doesn't really get above $40 here until after the pandemic. So this stock, it did experience this massive run higher, and that's why we're seeing the volatility, the pullback, and we have the relative rotation graph highlighted on the candlesticks. You can see that red means it was lagging, then it turning and improving, and then the next step would be leading the market. So it could break out, it would turn leading, continue higher, and then we would expect a pullback back to this support line. But you can see the last time that Peloton was leading the market, it wasn't a pretty sight. It started leading here, and then it rolled over, and then went straight back to lagging. So right now, since we're already back up to the improving sector in the relative rotation graph, I'm not counting on it for the leading to take it much higher from here. It's on my tank it list, so I'm expecting it to fall. And my price target for the stock is $50 a share. It's a 50% decline for Peloton that I'm looking at based on this head and shoulders pattern, based on the volatility that we're seeing in the stock, and the simple fact that sales are going to slow down because we're out of the pandemic. People are going to be having these things sitting at their house that they're not even using anymore because they're so excited just to go back to a gym, that their sales are definitely going to slow down going forward, and they're struggling with their treadmills. They're getting bad press. And I know everybody likes to say, well, Some press is better than no press, but not in this case. Not when it has to deal with children getting hurt. That's just bad press for the company, for the stock. And this stock is going to be on my Think It list. Price target $50 a share. That's all for today. Again, don't forget to subscribe to my video and give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. And I'll be back next week with another quick takes where we're going to run through more stocks. So leave me a comment. Let me know what stocks you want me to feature in an upcoming Bank It or Tank It video. Until next time, I'm Chad Shoup.